feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled TIFF review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rorabeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is tomato meter approved, Eric Marchen.
Matt, we're bringing the canned content to TIFF. This is, I think, one of only a handful of Canadian films that we've talked about. We reviewed Charlotte.
Is that it? We're horrible Canadians. I'm so sorry.
No, Night Raiders as well.
Oh, Night Raiders. Okay, cool.
That's two.
Yeah. This probably should cover more, but that's a different conversation. This one's hitting pretty close to home. We are reviewing Shasha, Nakhai and Rich Williamson's Scarborough. Sorry, I lost my place of where I needed to read from there for a second.
Based on Catherine Hernandez's novel, and she is also the screenwriter adapting her own work.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Nice. Thank you, Eric. Scarborough, only about a 25-minute drive from, both Whitby and Oshawa, where Eric and I grew up, essentially. So,
fun fact,
yeah.
My grandparents lived in Scarborough.
Oh,
my mom went to high school in Scarborough.
There you go. You have an even closer connection.
They lived on 2 Dorcott Road, and I remember they would always, as a kid, take me to Thompson Park, which wasn't too far away.
Cool.
But I think what is really important about this movie is it shows you a side of Scarborough you rarely see, and it shows you a side that is basically underrepresented in film, and characters and stories that are underrepresented in movies. So essentially what Scarborough is almost like I said in my one tweet, it's almost like watching sort of a combination of a Robert Altman movie in the style of, like, an ensemble cast of characters as we kind of navigate through the titular Scarborough, but then also it has a sort of social political aspect that isn't very off from something like Kes, and so watching this movie, there was, admittedly, I was a little bit nervous at first, just because handheld cinematography doesn't always work for me, and there's always the aspect or the concern that maybe the filmmakers are exploiting the topic of low income families as quote unquote poverty porn.
Yeah. Because I think the easy thing to describe this as is like a Canadian Florida project, which I've seen some people kind of talk about, which I don't necessarily agree with, but
no, I mean, it's with the Florida project, there's, and maybe there is some of this, and I don't mind, please correct me if I'm wrong. There are more sort of classically trained actors in this, where Sean Baker, even though, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of first timers, because from the point of view, the story takes place from the point of view of 3 children, and sort of their lives intersecting at this school, at this sort of literacy room, and where that goes, and it's very well handled, I think, in terms of juggling 3 separate storylines and how they intertwine over the course of a year. But yeah, what I was nervous about is how it kind of presents certain characters and where they're coming from, and you always worry that it's going to exploit certain elements of that. But I think that the script and the direction and the performances all find a way to kind of balance the truth in coming from a place of not having much, but also still finding the right notes in terms of being happy and finding progress and understanding that there are people out there that do see you and do care about you. And I think there needs to be more Miss Hinas in this world, and
absolutely,
that character and that performance specifically
is so wonderful.
Really hit hard in terms of that's the teacher that so many kids will never have the chance to work with and be educated by, and that is just a real shame. And just those moments between that character and Laura are some of the most emotionally impactful, I think, of the film.
No, I totally agree with you. I really, really like the film. Was a little hesitant at first with that 2 hour and almost 20-minute runtime. I think it's just something that will always be like, will it earn that? And I think it does. I think it's one of the best made Canadian films I've seen in a very long time. I think being Canadian and knowing the Canadian film system and stuff like that, that we're sometimes a little harsher. At least I am on Canadian projects because I just want them to be great. And a lot of the times I just comparing it to, international cinema from other countries and stuff, I just sometimes, I'm just harder on it than maybe others are. But I thought this was great. I love the interconnectedness, the telling of the three stories from these three families. I think it continues a theme that I'm seeing at TIFF, which I also tweeted out, being like, very adult problems, not just adult problems, but very adult problems through the lens of children, and specifically in this movie, community and oftentimes family, which this movie also does. And I saw that in Petite Maman, I saw that in Belfast, and I saw that in this film, where there are very heavy themes and heavy things that happen, and it's dealing with the problems of not even problems, just the struggles that these families and the adults and the parents go through, but it's kind of presenting it from the children's perspective. And I thought there was very lovely moments where sometimes you're seeing, and what you're talking about, Eric, with the handheld cinematography and stuff like that, where it's down low on the children's kind of level, as like the adults are kind of talking and engaging above them, and you're not necessarily seeing the adults, but you're hearing them, or you're seeing it from the kids perspective, which I really liked. um and I just thought, like you said, yeah, it's showing a community and showing something that we don't necessarily see very often in Canadian film. And I know the novel is very well regarded as well, but it was just kind of, it hit home because this is only this 25 minutes away, and you just don't often see that. And I just love seeing these three kids interact. And even though they're going through a lot, and they're trying to do, these families are trying to do their best, and I connected with a lot of it. And my own, I'm not trying to compare my situation to anything that these families are going through, but even from the children, like, I remember going to my mom's, my mom worked at my opa owned two shoe stores in Oshawa. And my parents, my mom worked at that shoe store, and didn't, either didn't have enough money, or they didn't want to pay for babysitters all the time. So I remember going to, she would just let me come to work with her, and my cousins would come, or whoever, because my aunt Karen also worked there, and we'd play in this shoe store, and we'd wander around Five Points Mall in Oshawa, or around. And there's just moments like that in this movie that I just thought were very sweet from the kids, and felt very authentic and real. um like you said, the teacher, which, sorry, Eric, what's her name?
Miss Hina, who's played by
Hina
Aaliyah uh, Kanani, who again is like,
is,
if this
yeah,
was like an A24 movie, as you mentioned with the Florida Project, she would be getting all sort of accolades for best
yeah,
supporting actress. Like, this is like a
definitely the
great
breakout. Yeah,
supporting performance, and
yeah,
one that should be recognized when it
absolutely.
comes to award season. Like, it's just one of those great teacher roles.
Yeah,
But the
and
kids
dealing
are
with,
all good too.
the kids are great. And it took me a second to grow, to kind of get acclimated, and for it to grow on me. But like, the more I got on, the more I loved those kids that it focused on. And then just the problems she's dealing with, just being such a wonderfully nice person, and how the bureaucracy and the kind of bullshit that she has to deal with through her kind of passive aggressiveness of her boss, which is displayed through um emails on screen, and it's read aloud by the actress who plays her boss, who eventually shows up at the end. And even those moments, like, I really liked, because I feel like email, especially in the last year and a half during COVID and stuff like that, I feel like we've all tried to kind of figure out how to navigate that. And I thought they did a good job of her boss being sort of passive aggressive to her, and the fake niceties through that. And I just thought that was really well done as well. But
Yeah, and there might
um,
also be maybe an underlying factor that it is even mentioned in those emails that, her superior might have been like her at one point, where,
yeah,
like, you go into a system, whether it be, a school system or anything that's the social work or anything like that, and you're always very optimistic at the beginning, and you want to do not only what's right, but you want to change things and change things for the better. And you see this character taking on not only sort of encouraging literacy, but also trying
which is
to,
ultimately her job,
yeah, but she's going above and beyond,
Yeah.
where she's trying to help feed these kids. She's trying to give them a safe place to play, but also learn and discover things about the world that maybe they wouldn't get outside, or in their own homes. And the way that she deals with prejudice and racism, especially from one dad, um, she takes the high road, and she didn't have to, because if I were in her shoes, I would just literally let him have it. But she always does the best for the kids. And there's so many great moments with those kids as well, and also learning about their families, and sort of one mom who leaves an abusive relationship, and takes her son, being played by Liam Diaz, and sort of goes to work at a nail and manicure salon. And she does all this great work, but the people just tip her with $1, and it's so disrespectful. But
Yeah.
it says so much, and just putting that loony down, and you're just kind of like, dude, you just literally said how amazing that manicure was. And then you
Yeah.
just like, well, I don't care enough about you to
Yeah.
I'm not laughing at I'm laughing at how horrible that situation
Yes, I
is,
agree. Yeah.
and how frustrating it is. And there are some moments, I will admit, that I felt later on. I think the script and the filmmakers are able to get away with it because it is from the child's point of view, but there
Mm-hmm.
is this kind of spiritual quality to one specific scene that kind of feels a little bit out of place for the rest of the film, which is very much grounded in reality. It just kind of felt like that one moment, maybe around Christmas, that kind of again didn't click with the rest of the movie, tonally speaking. But I also think that this is in terms of songs, one of the best songs, or one of the best uses of
Of Mortal Kombat.
I was going to say that, especially of 2021, this is the best movie to use that theme.
Mortal
But
Kombat.
also,
Yeah.
I Want to Dance with Somebody, the Whitney
Yeah.
Houston song, which is a total banger,
Yeah.
and such a really lovely crescendo
Yeah.
on the film as well.
I do
Yeah,
agree with both of those things.
it,
Yeah.
it is such a lovely little movie that it's hard not to like. But then it continues to grow and build, and it's more than just heartfelt or a crowd pleaser.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a really thoughtful piece of filmmaking that examines, as you mentioned, a community, and seeing the side of a community that we rarely get to see, whether it be populated from low income families or people of color. We're seeing a side
Yeah.
that otherwise we wouldn't get to see, and that is, I think, crucial to getting that right. And that's the other thing, like, the filmmakers and the writer don't feel like outsiders. Like, if you were to get this from somebody who's attached to direct a movie like this, and I don't think it
Mm-hmm.
would come off as authentic as it does.
No, I totally agree with that. And like you said, like, the movie kind of wins you over. So even if you have some problems here and there with, I didn't love how one of the dad character was written at times. I didn't love, like, the cop in the, like, certain things like that just felt like a little heavy-handed, or a little bit too much, or overly written to the point of it was a little distracting to me, especially with the dad of one young girl, like, in the kind of latter half of where that goes.
You're
I
talking
didn't
about Laura's
Yeah,
dad, right?
Laura's dad, which you already brought up, I think at times it works, but the more horrible he became, and I'm not saying that people like that don't exist, and things like that, and but I just felt like, in the context of this movie, sometimes it came off, and I don't want to sound too rude, but like a little cartoony in the way that the cop was acting at the nail salon, or the way that this man, this father, was acting throughout the movie. Like, I feel
I
like
don't disagree with you,
you
but
could tone it down just like a tiny, just a
right.
smidge. That's all I wanted.
What I
Sorry.
will say in its defense
Yeah.
usually in this kind of movie, if it was a studio film
Yeah.
or an indie movie with studio backing, usually that kind of character would change their ways.
Oh, I'm
Where
glad they stuck
yeah,
to it.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with
you never
that.
get that. And there's some stuff with him and Laura when they're on their own in the apartment that I thought was quite telling that, some people really shouldn't be parents.
I absolutely agree with that. And I'm glad that they stuck to their guns and just made him not glad that he was a horrible piece of shit, but in the movie, in the context of the
But
movie.
I get what you're
Um
saying too, where it's almost like you have to vilify some people, or sort of really kind of like they, as you mentioned, become a caricature of what
yeah.
there's not a lot of depth to this specific person,
Mhm.
compared to all the richness that is throughout the film and the
And
other
that's
characters.
exactly what I mean. But the movie is so good that you kind of forgive that.
Yeah.
That's kind of ultimately like it didn't bother me to the point where I'm like, oh, they kind of ruined the last bit of the movie or anything. Like it just was a little distracting where I'm like, I feel like we could have they were kind of at 11 and I would have liked them to even just be at 9. Like it could have still been a lot, but like and you stick to your guns of like, no, again, some people just shouldn't be parents and just are bad people. Like I know those people exist out there. I just felt like to Eric's wonderful point that he just made, that all the other characters in the movie felt nuanced and not over the top, and there were a couple there that I was just like, this doesn't completely work, but the movie itself works, so it's totally fine. But I think that's the only thing that was hindered me from like absolutely loving the movie. I think it's fantastic, are very, very good. Um, and again, with running times, like again, I think you really need to earn it. And I think the movie does a good job at 2 hours and 20 minutes, never overstaying its welcome. It's got a lot going on, but I feel like it earns that 2 hours and 20-minute runtime. And I was never like, holy shit, I need this thing to end. Like never at one point, which I think is a testament to how well done the movie is. So yeah,
Yeah, I
I thought it was
agree. It
great.
doesn't feel overly long. Like there are some movies where it's like you're still enjoying them, and
I
you
watched a
also
66-minute festival or movie this festival that I couldn't make it through because it felt like really long.
so that's another
So
great testament to how good Scarborough is in terms
yeah,
of its movie making and its pacing, and the thoughtfulness that's going into the
yeah,
storytelling. And again, like it's just one of those movies where you know you look at this and you're like, okay, this is a great representation of what solid Canadian filmmaking should be,
yes, and
and
that's
very
exactly it.
proud to have this movie amongst an international lineup of films and
Totally.
show
I
our
think it,
best.
it yeah, I think it stands up to any of those. One other thing, not to end it on a negative because I'll end it on a positive. The proper house kind of line in the like richer people's house, I hate it. I just
I
couldn't.
did as I didn't like that character, but it was
I just
weird how
like
that was inserted because it
yeah,
almost felt like at that moment, like, and again, I don't mean to be negative because I really do like the movie,
I
but
same, but like
it almost felt like that was out of like like an Adam Sandler comedy or
yes,
something like
like
that, where it's like,
it felt weirdly out of place,
yeah,
and like I just don't think you needed it. Like you
no,
didn't need it. And that was the one thing where I'm like, oof, that just does not work. And then
no, it
like,
doesn't.
but the movie's great. And shout out to Active Green and Ross because I was like, oh, I
Keep
won't
it
see another.
rolling,
Yeah.
active Green and Ross.
Not a sponsor, but it's just when something's so close to home and you just see, I'm like, oh, I doubt I'll see an Active Green and Ross in any other movie this year. So, and only people from the GTA will probably understand what the hell we're
I
talking
wonder if
about
that was
there,
on
but
anybody's TIFF bingo sheets.
Active Green and Ross. Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't know.
I want
But
to say one more thing as well
yeah,
with the movie. I think it also portrays autism in a very realistic manner, and it doesn't just simply define it by just calling it autism. Like you see, so one of the main characters, Sylvie, has a brother who's undiagnosed at the beginning, and we see the mom go to a walk-in to try
I've
to
been to
figure it
that doctor so many times. It's like, oh,
right.
it's fine, and
Yeah,
just like
just
God.
have somebody else deal with it later on. Just
Dude,
don't
there's so
bother me
that
anymore.
felt so realistic to me
Yeah.
because like my walk-in doctor, like family doctor when I was younger, was that older white guy who is frustrated because people come in way too often for, you know, little things, or he's dealing with the guy who just wants Oxycontin in the lobby or something.
Or they
So he's
just
kind
don't
of,
want to deal with it in
yeah,
general because it's too much work for them and they couldn't be
yeah.
bothered.
And that is unfortunately all too common, because I dealt with that my whole life with this doctor that my sister and I constantly told our parents that was just the worst, because he was that guy who'd just be like, you're fine, and like, you're wasting
You could
my
have a
time
knife in your
essentially.
neck and that guy
Yeah.
would be like, just put some
and
polysporin on it.
and even like for a personal story, my mom, you know, just went through thyroid cancer, um and I'll let you get to your point, Eric, and sorry to make it
No, 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 no.
personal, but I just
This
felt
is
like
good.
that was very real, the way that this doctor kind of just brushed off her concerns and said like, well, it's going to be too much work for you and it's too much work for me, so just give it a couple years and let it be someone else's problem essentially, or you'll figure it out. And I've dealt with that, like where my mom, you know, asked our family doctor when we were younger, and my sister and I hated this fucking guy, and he always, like, my mom would be like, oh, I think I have like a lump in my throat, and he'd be like, oh, it's nothing, it's nothing. And then years later we find out that it was, you know, thyroid cancer. And I'm just like, this guy brushed it off. And luckily thyroid cancer, one of the good ones, my mom's, you know, fine, but like she had to have surgery just like Nevis did, and things like that. And it just, that scene really hit for me, because I was like, man, there's too many times where people who really are in need, and there are, you know, and I know that most doctors are doing their best and things like that, but that hit home where he's just kind of, oh, well, you know, he's just a little behind. And then, you know, and ultimately where the movie goes really kind of proves a point of, no, they needed help at that time, and that guy was not there for them.
Yeah, and that's what I think is kind of amazing, but and also how it handles sort of the diagnosis
Yeah.
process, even though it's truncating it, obviously because it's, you know, a 2 hour film, it's not,
Hmm.
you know, spanning over the course of months, but the way that it depicts it in sort of the process of diagnosis and also, you know, sort of treatment and sort of routine to communicate with the child, I think is done in a manner that feels very realistic. I have a cousin who's high functioning autistic, and there's just some stuff there that you can see the frustration and pain and sadness in the mother who wants so desperately to be able to communicate with her child and do whatever she can for him, but at the
And there's
same
such a
time,
lovely moment near the end of the
yeah,
movie.
feels
Yeah.
completely and utterly lost and doesn't know what to do. And like you said, there is this wonderful payoff that again is very emotional, but it's never exploitative, and it earns that scene so poignantly. And
I agree.
yeah, it's just one of those movies that it's so, I mean, we were talking about the humans, but this movie is just so human, and
Yeah.
a great sort of, you know, cross sectional sort of look at community and sort of just the people in general. Like, you know, this is about a community and how important that is. And, you know, the Rogers line being community matters, but like it truly does. And to spotlight those who aren't seen,
And
I
I
think is really
love
important.
even Sylvie when she's walking with her mom and she sees all the people on her walk home from school, and it kind of focuses on that community of like, you know, whether the woman who's
As the
running
dog.
the dog, and like, or the guy who's painting the murals that comes back in later in a, a sequence at Christmas. But just the relationship with all of them in that community, where it's like, you know, this is her walk to school every day, so she sees these people that are outside of their apartments, and she became friends with them, even though the mom's kind of just like, all right, hurry up, we gotta get going, like, you can't just spend your time talking to these random people. But I think that's just such a lovely little thing where it shows you it doesn't necessarily focus on those other people, or and even her relationship with what was the older man that she goes to the dollar store with and something, like he barely
Oh
has
yeah,
any lines
yeah.
in the movie, but I forget, it's like Mr. I'm trying to find it here, I have the press notes, but anyways, there's this older man that Mr. George like, so Mr. George lives at their apartment kind of complex, and you know, Mr. George watches her Sylvie sometimes when the mom has stuff to do. And there's just like little things like that where there's all these kind of side characters that don't necessarily all get their moment a little bit in the movie, even though it's not really about them, but it's about how these kids kind of engage with them and how this community all comes together. And yeah, it's really lovely. Like, and someone's like, how could you say this movie's lovely? And I'm like, yeah, it has some harder and things happen in it, but I think overall it's just a lovely movie to showcase this stuff, even if there is some sadness in the movie and things like that. But I do think it's quite good. So I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5. So little nitpicky things, but I think it's quite good.
Yeah, I'm also going to give it a 4 out of 5. It's really well done, and again, just one of those movies that I think you can take and say like this is Canadian, and this is also just a great movie.
I
It's not
agree with that.
just Canadian, and it's not just good because it's Canadian. It's a good movie because it's a good movie.
Yeah, I know Level Film has it here in Canada. I would love for it. It wouldn't make any money probably if it got released in the US and something, but I would like someone to kind of, because I think it does, certain A24 movies you're talking about and stuff like that. Like, I think it can go against those
It's
movies.
just as
And
good.
like,
Yeah, it
yeah,
really
so I
is.
feel like, maybe it's a harder sell if it's not Canada, but I would love for it to get a little bit more eyes on it. So I'm hoping it gets kind of a wider release, but we'll see. Thank you all for listening. Eric and I have been covering the entirety of the Toronto International Film Festival this year. You can check out all of our reviews video form over on our YouTube channel. So just search for Untitled Movie Podcast. Will probably pop up somewhere there, Untitled Movie Reviews, which is our audio version over on all podcast services. Just search for Untitled Movie Reviews and you'll get all of our TIFF coverage and all of our other coverage, because after the festival's done, we got 4 or 5 movies we already got to catch up with. Will we review them? Maybe. We
Or
might
we'll
need to
talk
take a
about them
break
on the regular
on the
show.
regular show. Yeah. So we'll see. Head over to our Letterboxd HQ. It's kind of our one-stop shop for everything. So if you need to go to our social channels or see our star ratings or our personal profiles or to get to the YouTube videos, just head over there. It's Untitled_movies. Probably the easiest spot for all of those. And as always, my name is Matt Rorabeck. You can find more of my work around the internet, but mostly at untitledmoviepodcast.com. And you can follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rorabeck.
And I'm Eric Marchen. You can find more of my video reviews at rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
Mortal Kombat!
Bum, bum, bum. I was going to do the Active Green and Ross song, but make it rolling. Is it rolling? Active Green and Ross. Horrible. Bye, everybody.